Hey there guys, welcome back to the Doug and Racecraft YouTube channel. On this episode, we basically start over from scratch. Okay there guys, as you can see since the last video, we've changed a couple things. So I went ahead and picked up a Boss 2 intake manifold. The reason I did that, these obviously tend to favor a little bit more high RPM power, which I'm kind of looking for in this situation. I got her all dolled up for the time being. I ended up getting these Boss 302 fuel rail covers from a buddy of mine, Derek, whose car you saw in the previous videos, that white 97 Cobra. I've been sitting on these for quite a while now, so I'm glad I finally get to use those. It's very unfortunate because so the headers that I had started making, they still fit. I did end up having to lower the engine because that intake manifold was gonna hit on my pristine hood. The way I did that was, when I did the front suspension, did these frame rails, I ended up lowering the frame rails 3 inches as well as widening them 3 inches to accommodate the Mustang 2 front suspension kit for a first gen Mustang. Originally, the way I did this was I had the frame rails at the factory height, just the spread 3 inches to accommodate the suspension. But it really just didn't work out that well. I ended up lowering the rack so that I had more room to lower the engine, and the stock intake manifold with the engine cover didn't fit under the hood. The intake manifold itself did, but the cover did not. And I would like this to look halfway decent for the amount of time and effort that I've put into this. So we decided to end up lowering the frame rails 3 inches as well as keeping them the same width apart. And when I did that, I kept the motor basically, I lowered it a little bit, but I kept it mostly in the same spot that it was with the rails. The reason I lowered the rails was to give me more room for the headers, because the height of the rails is really what the issue is for these. You could leave the rails at the factory width, but lower them 3 inches and the motor would fit just fine. So with having the frame rails lower, now I can lower the engine and get the intake manifold to fit under the hood without cutting anything out. That'll be, you know, it kind of sucks to have to go back and redo all that work, but it's good for you guys because you get to see how I did this in the first place. So without further ado, we're gonna pull this engine out and we're gonna start cutting shit up. But first, we gotta get equipped with our safety equipment. Bam. As you can see, got my welding cap on as well as my safety glasses to protect my eye booglies from flying shrapnel. Ta-da! Okay, so here we are, we're in the engine bay. I took the whole front clip off the car, just make it a little bit easier to film everything. And these are what we gotta cut off. So as I said before, the motor's up a little bit too high for that Boss manifold to fit to clear the hood. And nearly everybody that I've asked about this said that I should just put a cowl on it, but if I put a cowl on it, then I can't put the hood decals on it because this is a King Cobra. So we're gonna cut these off and basically just move them down. I probably won't kick them up like this again. I'll probably just use this plate because these plates have the eyelets drilled in them for those motor mounts already. And I will say, these are probably the biggest downside to having to pull the motor in and out right now the way that it is, because these headers, especially when they're done, I mean, they're short right now. Those headers, when they're done, they're gonna hit on this plain as day. And I don't wanna have to get the motor halfway in and then try and put the headers on it because it's just not a good way of doing things. So what's probably gonna end up happening here, I'm thinking, is we're gonna cut this plate off the front, lower it down, and then we'll use DOM tubing instead of boxing it in like this again. Just makes it easier to avoid, and the DOM tubing should be more than strong enough to hold what we got going on here. So we're either going to use the cutting torch or the plasma cutter for this. According to my dad, the plasma cutter tips are all worn out, and of course Eastwood's on back order for them. So if we can't use the plasma cutter, we're going to use the cutting torch. So let's find out. Okay, moment of truth. Don't forget to wear your safety glasses. These are my super cool dad safety glasses. All right, so we just finished up cutting this off. I would use the plasma cutter to cut this stuff 9 times out of 10. I highly recommend picking one up if you have the means. I'm probably going to come back up here, up top though, and clean that up with the cutting torch, just because it's a lot easier to shave stuff off than it is with the plasma cutter. Because that plasma cutter needs you basically to keep moving to continue that arc. So once I get that cut off, this cleaned up with the torch, we'll go ahead and pick it back up. All right, not pretty, but we got the job done. Just so long as you can get a lot of that slag off, the filler material is the hardest part of the weld. So the more of that you can get off, the easier it's gonna be to grind down. Notice how I didn't basically cut into any of the base metal. All I did was cut a lot of the weld off. So we're gonna grab a flap disc. I had to order some, so let's go pick those up and we will grind this down. Freeze, dirtbag! Okay, so we got everything cut out. I got these motor plates cleaned up. These are the plates we're going to use the motor mounts that I have. I'm just going to make a couple points really quick just to help you guys out if you are using this video to work on some of your own things. These are mostly issues that I will have with this particular platform, but some of these issues you may not have. As far as motor mounts go, I ended up using motor mounts for a 96 through 04 Mustang with the mod motor in it, because the Coyote uses the same engine mount spread pattern for the bolts that the modular Fords use. They also have the same bell housing pattern, in case you were wondering. So just in terms of serviceability, I did want to use those motor mounts because I know that anywhere in the country I can go to a parts store and they'll be able to get those. I was going to custom fabricate motor mounts for this particular setup, but the problem with that is eventually they're going to go bad. Motor mounts always go bad eventually. It doesn't matter how long it takes, they always do. So like I said, I want a motor mount so I could get nearly anywhere. So these plates match those holes. There's a dowel locating hole on the motor mount, and this is a slotted hole because it'll sit at a 45 so that the stud can go down in and seat at the bottom of the hole here with a nut on the backside. As I said before, we're going to use some DOM tubing. This is 1/8 inch thick, 1 inch tube, I'm pretty sure. Just some things to consider when you're making your own motor mounts. Obviously, number one being the most important, the obstacles. With nearly any setup, you're going to have to avoid the steering shaft, and you have to either put it in a place that you can make your own headers, or that headers that are readily available will fit. Another thing to consider is driveline angle as well as the body angle. So the driveline angle is the angle of the center line of the engine in relation to the body of the car. To have the body completely parallel with the ground at 0 degrees isn't necessarily a huge deal, but you do want to take the body angle into consideration when you're doing the driveline angle. So for instance, let's say I have the car right now, it's low in the back. It's lower in the back than it is in the front. So let's say I have a 2 degree body angle. Ideally, from everybody that I've asked, you want the driveline angle to be at 0 degrees, because then you can shim it either way and give you a degree or two to go either direction, whether it be up or down. You also want the rear end angle, the pinion angle on the rear end, to be the opposite of that. So I'm going to set this up so the driveline angle is at 0. So let's say the body angle is 2 degrees downhill. You want the engine to also be 2 degrees downhill, and you want to measure that from a surface that's parallel to the center line of the engine. So in this particular situation, the intake manifold flanges will be parallel to the crank center line. So, and then the final thing is oil pan and ground clearance. Luckily, with me lowering the K-member as much as I did, it puts the cross member for the oil pan at the lowest point. And then also when I build the radiator support, I will make that lower than the oil pan just to protect it. So may eventually make a skid plate for it too, just in case, but I don't think I'll end up needing it. But that's definitely something to consider, because you don't want to smash that oil pan off the ground. So without further ado, let's get this drivetrain plot back in and we will start making the motor mounts. All right, here we are. As you can see here, here's the motor mount. I got that plate pretty solidly bolted to it. And I also went ahead and cut the piece of DOM that we're gonna go ahead and use for this. So I know that this surface is parallel with the stroke of the crank, which this is a 90-degree V8. So this plate's gonna be 45 degrees off center. So then with this rail being perpendicular to the ground, I know that the angle between these two surfaces here is gonna end up being 45 degrees. And since I want the runner to run at an uphill angle to better support this plate, I know that both of those angles need to add up to be 45 degrees. So I already got that cut. So here we are with that. Pretty simple deal here. Something just like that. So then what I'm doing is welding this to the plate, gusseting the top of it here so it won't want to sag, and then we will go ahead and do the other side. Okay, so as you can see, we got the passenger side tacked up, and then off camera I also went ahead and did the driver's side. They're not at the same angle and they're not the same length because the engine is slightly offset to the passenger side. It was like that from the factory. It's more centered than it was originally. I think originally in Mustang 2s, it was an inch off to the passenger side. I retained most of that just because I didn't want to have to cut up the trans tunnel. That just would have been a lot more work than it was probably going to be worth. So right now, like I said, we're about 1/2 inch offset, 1/4 to 1/2. I don't remember exactly what it is, but we got that in. So the angles are going to be different, but you never see both at the same time anyways. So now that we got that finished up, we're gonna go ahead and we are going to measure the driveline angle. Currently, we are at 1.8 degrees nose down because this is where the bubble's at. The bubble's towards the top, which means the front of the engine's pointing down. And right now, the car is 1 degree downhill the other way. So I'm gonna go ahead and get you guys rigged up underneath, and we're gonna go ahead and show you guys the transmission crossmember that I made. That we're gonna cut up because we're gonna start over. So let's go ahead and jump right into that. All right, so here we are under the car. This is my transmission crossmember here. You will notice our lovely 6R80 trans jack we got going on right here. For those of you that aren't hip on 6R80s, they have a huge hump in the middle of the transmission pan that makes them very difficult to get a jack on. So what we did here, just took a plate of 1/4 inch thick stuff here, cut a hole in it for the jack so that it's still supported by the jack and is held down to that. Then my dad took and cut 2x4s around here and then pocket screwed them, and then we screwed them to the plate so that it supports the transmission. So what we gotta do here now, all I did was, when I made this originally, was this is just a piece of 1x1 1/8 or 3/16 tube with a tab welded on the back with 2 holes in it. I want to say these are like 1/4 inch or 5/16 holes, whatever these studs are. And then the way it's supported is I drilled holes, because these are these 3/16 tubes, drilled holes for these mounting tabs and then tapped those to a 7/16 bolt, which is this right here. Pretty good size. Now, just remember, if you were gonna nut and bolt this, a nut isn't more than 3/16 or 1/4 inch thick anyways, so I'm not even remotely worried about these bolts coming back out, especially when we Loctite them in for when it's going together for the last time. And keep in mind, the only thing that these bolts have to do is hold it in. The only way that these bolts would break is from shear strength, and they're a 7/16 bolt, which is thicker than what they used originally. So this is gonna be more than enough for what we got going on here. The reason it's straight across is because there's not even enough room to get fingers with, basically, up above where the floor is. So that's why I went straight across. The headers are gonna have to go underneath it anyways, but when I redo it this time, I am gonna pie cut it so that it kicks up a little bit, kicks down to lower the transmission, and then does the same thing on the other side. So basically all I'm gonna do is cut it here and here, pie cut some pieces so that I can fill that gap with the transmission come down. Right now it probably has to come down 3/4 to 1 inch. Like I said before, it's 2 degrees nose down and the car is 1 degree the other way. So 3 degrees to come down over, you know, how it's gonna pivot from the motor mounts. So 3 degrees back here is gonna be quite a huge jump, more than a jump than it would be if you were further forward on the frame rails. So without further ado, let's start hacking shit up. Okay. Here we are. You will notice my 3rd or 4th wardrobe change for this video. This video is filmed over a couple of days. We got her done. So what I ended up doing here, obviously, like I said, I pie cut it. I didn't do pie cuts technically. All I did was put slices in the backside of the tube, bend the tube, and then weld it all back together. It came out pretty nice. If you didn't know any better, once this is all ground down, you'd think it was one piece and it was bent with a mandrel. I'm just that good. As you can see, it kicked down quite a bit, a lot further than I thought it would have originally. This is probably 2 inches from top to top here. Like I said, 3 degrees to go down over, call it 4 feet from the motor mounts to here. That's quite a huge jump. So I did check to see if the intake manifold still cleared after we did this, and luckily it does. It has the smallest margin to fit. And luckily, I know from doing that Cobra that I can grind a little bit off that boss manifold and clean it up, and it'll end up looking fine. So that's all good there. All right, guys, that's gonna wrap it up for this video. We got a lot done. Basically got everything done we wanted to get done in this video, I suppose, right? I really didn't plan on making this video. I did the last one, I'm pretty sure I had said that this was basically all the way done. Obviously, things change. Like I said, got this manifold from a buddy of mine, and I was planning on using it on the truck. But then I'm like, you know, just for shits and giggles, let's throw it on the car and see what it looks like. Once I saw it on here, I had to do it. I had to make it work. The problem was it hit the hood, and it was about an inch and a half away from fitting. It really didn't take that long. It was just a lot of tedious, busy work that, you know, really wouldn't have been that good for you guys to see. In the next video, we're gonna go ahead and start doing the headers. The headers are most of the way done. I had to redo the driver's side just because with moving the engine down, where the steering shaft went through the headers on the driver's side. And obviously, when you move the engine down but keep the steering shaft in the same spot, it's gonna end up hitting. So it did. Redid 2 of the tubes. Starting to make the collectors for those now. That'll be some good content, I think. I said it before and I'll say it again. A lot of fabrication heavy stuff in this. Basically everything we gotta do here, we gotta make from scratch. Everything we gotta make from scratch, because most of the people that do Coyote swaps, I say most, not all, most of the people that do Coyote swaps are doing them into Fox bodies, and they have 10 different headers, 10 different K members you can use. it just works out a lot better. So Fox bodies are pretty easy to do. They're pretty much a bolt-in deal. Basically every other platform besides that, you have to make your own stuff, which is unfortunate, but good for you guys. Aside from the headers, we got a couple other good things coming. I started ordering the parts to put this motor together. This is just a shell, basically, empty cylinder heads, empty block with a timing cover on it. I might send these heads off to get CNC ported by Livernoise. I'm not sure if that's gonna end up happening or not yet. I'm in talks with them to see if we can make that happen. I have a Gen 3 short block we're gonna use, like I said before, Gen 2 timing components. I have to get on the phone with Ford Performance and clarify a few things before we do that, but that'll be some good stuff. Also, we'll do the rear end gears, got all the disc brake stuff coming. We got a lot of the good stuff coming, so if that is something that interests you, go ahead and subscribe, like the video if you like the video. So at the beginning of the new year, I am gonna try and upload every other Sunday. I think that's a pretty manageable goal. There's just so much work to be done in this car, and a lot of it is stuff that I think that you guys would like to see, so we're gonna go ahead and try and make that work. But with that being said, I do want to put out quality content. I'm very much a quality over quantity kind of guy, so if I don't have a video that's ready to go, I'm not going to put something out that's unfinished. If you guys want updates in between my videos, follow me on Instagram at Duggan Racecraft and follow me on Facebook at Sean Duggan. But that's going to do it for this one. I appreciate you guys watching, and we'll catch you in the next one. Y'all take care now.